Welcome back to another episode of Petrol Poodle, and excitingly, it is my new daily car. Well, I say new, actually it's the 1 year update of this car. I found that my own reviews do best when I've actually had time to live with them, obviously, so I thought I'd wait a while and let you know what it's actually been like to live with. If you told me a few years ago you'd be peeling me out of my MX-5 or my Swift Sport or any of my fun cars in favour of a diesel DILF spec Volvo V60, I would have smashed the books out of your hands, shoved you into the locker and said, "You better not come to the big dance tonight." Well, life is full of unkind surprises. Or is it? You see, actually, this is the best car I've ever owned at doing what a car is supposed to do. This was Volvo trying to give the brand a bit more excitement, more contemporary design. And actually, I think it's aged really, really well. So who is the Volvo for? Well, there's two ways to look at it. You're either comparing this with an Audi A4, 3 Series Touring, Mercedes C-Class, you know, these kind of smaller, more compact estates, not quite as fully practical as the big boys, but not everybody wants a huge, huge, huge long estate. They just want that little bit more space. That's one way of looking at who its competitors are. If you are going to get a Volvo anyway, well then this sits between the super good looking V40 with a pretty damn small boot and between the massive V70. The problem is, this car, any bit of reading you do about it, you'll discover its Achilles heel is it has got a slightly small boot. I have managed to live with it. It is actually pretty good, and you can get more in there than it looks, but definitely compared to its competitors, it has got a smaller boot. It's also not that much shorter than a V70. Now, I've never had trouble parking it anywhere. I've never felt like this car is too long, and I know some V70 owners will say to you a near 5 metre car with a longer wheelbase is harder to get in places, not great in cities and stuff like that. But now that we're in this age of everybody being obsessed with SUVs, this is that kind of forgotten middle child, which is what makes it a lot of value for money. Now, something that Volvo have always been excellent at is the quality of the cabin materials, and they just build them. They just build it beautifully, to be honest. You've got soft touch plastics everywhere. You've got real leather here. You know, you've got the right amount of chrome trim without being too blinging over the top. You haven't got gloss plastic everywhere, you know, piano black gloss stuff, which is going to show up dust immediately. And really, everywhere you look, it's a decent quality plastic. The exception to that is this interior console here. That has got a matte plastic, which doesn't look bad, but for £60, I've actually bought a top spec one anyway, and I'm going to put that in hopefully 20 minutes if things don't go horribly wrong. At which point, it then looks and feels like a new car. This interior quality does actually trade blows with cars 10, 20 grand more. You know, I've been in E-classes, 5 Series, things like that, and I can immediately spot cheaper plastics in much more obvious places than this. It's a really good place to be. There's soft touch plastics everywhere. Look at me going all Matt Watson spec. I want to touch everything, scratch it, scratch it. Oh, get a bottle down there. Interior trim spec level, what do you get? Oh my God, what a minefield, honestly. In other cars, you always know you definitely get heated seats if you pick that one, and you definitely get parking sensors when you get that one. No, there's so many packs in this. There's so many individual options, heated seats or not. You can buy a top spec car without heated seats, without front parking sensors. Or you can buy this bottom spec one with lovely leather seats, heated and front parking sensors. It's a little bit all over the place. So the reality is you can get away with a really nice lower spec one like this, spend less money, and it still feels special to be in. You can eventually get adaptive cruise control, you know, lane keep assist, blind spot monitoring. You can get a Harman Kardon sound system, which is really super rare. But the reality is they actually put a high performance sound system in all of these V60, and it's incredible. Genuinely, it is one of the best sound systems I've heard in any car. It is absolutely superb. It always surprises people when I say there's no subwoofer in this. Because of the sound insulation, there's such good sound insulation in this car as well. That just kind of doubles down and gives the speakers a really good environment to shine. Whereas other cars I've been in have nice quality speakers, but it's a bit like playing them in a toilet cubicle. You know, it doesn't sound good if it's in a crap environment. So what else do you get with higher spec cars? Well, in the back you can get these little built-in baby booster seats, boot divider thing. You'll get electric memory seats that move around 2-3 positions or whatever, and these are kind of manually adjustable. And I think they might tilt in a certain way that these ones don't. And if that is the case, and like me, you do 6 hours a day of driving quite regularly, then that might be an option that you might want to consider. Now let's talk about some of the downsides. So the console here, 1 million buttons, which I actually really like because I'm not a big touchscreen fan. I love knowing where my climate controls are straight away, being able to change volume on the go, but I don't like the fact that dual zone climate control is never linked. So you have to do both dials separately. I just find that annoying. So I have to do every change on this, go to the left one, same thing. It's not the end of the world, is it? Once you know, but the play and pause button is actually the power button. Here, on the volume dial, that's how you press pause. You'd think that's how you turn the thing off. So that's stupid. There's no play and pause button on the wheel. Sometimes you do just want to stop. There's nothing there. Okay, so everyone says iDrive is the absolute kind of standard to match. And the nice thing with this car anyway is, whilst okay, it's probably not as good as iDrive or whatever, you don't really spend any time using it. Once you've set the car up the way you need, you're kind of good to go. And 9 times out of 10, I connect my phone, Bluetooth, drive away, and I don't have to delve into a single menu. And it's information is clear there. Great. If I really need to, you can also scroll up and down with this little thumb wheel on the wheel, and you can click in and out and exit and stuff on there. So it's all pretty good. Overall, at this price range, better than an A4, better than a C-Class, better than a 3 Series, hands down. And that is something Volvo should be proud of. You know, the fact that it has Ford ownership and Ford roots and things, you would never know. I think it only shares a couple of like window switches or something in common in terms of what you see. Other than that, superbly built. And we'll go on to mileage in a bit. In fact, no, let's do it right now. This car here, 150,000 miles. Look at the seats, hardly worn. Look at the interior, not a mark, not a scratch, nothing is worn remotely. There's no common touch points haven't worn away. Everything is spick and span. Seats are the main thing. Something that you spend hundreds and thousands of hours of your time sitting on, and most manufacturers don't give them enough time, I don't think. These are class leading seats. They genuinely are. I went to a used luxury car dealership a while ago just for fun, for a day out, to be honest, with my brother, and we went and, bless him, we went and sat in a bit of everything. Maseratis, Porsches, 80 grand Mercedes, obviously like BMWs, a Bentley Flying Spur from '07. These seats were comfier than all of them. Hands down. I'm 6 foot and I've left my front seat in exactly my driving position. It doesn't look like I've got an ocean of legroom here, which is true, but actually I have got a couple of inches, maybe 1.5 inches between my knees and the chair. But sat kind of comfortably like that, no probs. So overall though, actually really comfy, all things considered. Yes, I'm not swimming in space, but the nice thing about Volvo is they still put the same effort into the rear seats as well as the front. I've been in a lot of cars where it feels like you're sat on a school bench. They can be really firm in the back. These are really comfy. It's nicely padded still, decent headrests. And also a little touch, I like the climate controls being up here in the B pillars, which is quite a nice touch. Instead of just blowing down into your shin. Blah, 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 headroom's good. You know, I'm even pushing for it. I am struggling to make my head touch. I can feel my hair touching, but that's about it. Other than that, one of the things you don't get in the base spec, at least not in the business edition anyway, is you don't get an armrest that you can pull down with cup holders. That was something I didn't realise till I bought the car, and obviously high spec cars do get that. Okay, on to the unpopular boot. Whilst the literage is, yes, 430, not class leading at all, technically my Honda Civic had 485 or something like that. I think it actually had more. I way prefer this boot. It's a much easier shape and size to use. It doesn't have a really, really deep load lip down here. So really heavy items don't have to be, you know, pulled up and over and up towards you like that. And these seats fold completely flat, which again makes a really big difference to big heavy items. 9 times in my video gear I can actually fit under here, which is nice, and little things like having your retractable boot cover like that, nice and easy. I just way prefer that than having a huge old school, you know, parcel shelf that you have to bash out and then store big rigid things somewhere. For a sense of scale, I don't think this achieves anything, but compared to a V70, yeah, it ain't close. So if you've got real big family needs, I would jump straight to that, to be fair. What made me think of a V60 over all of the other options? Now, the V60s themselves, as I said, saving up for an 8 or 9 grand car, and I wanted it to have adaptive cruise control and all the rest of those gadgets and toys. So I was going to sit in the Honda for a bit longer and just put up with a slightly bad back and all the rest of it. But amazingly, I saw this one on Auto Trader for 5.5 grand, full service history, 134,000 miles. But in a really good spec as well. And typically at that time, at that price, you were getting the pre-facelift cars, and this is a facelift one. And so actually, the slightly unpopular estate of a V60 that not that many people are looking for means you get a hell of a lot of car for your money. As I said before, with the drawback of the slightly small boot. So how did I even get onto Volvo from my super duper reliable, amazingly practical and clever Honda Civic? Well, a friend of mine bought an XC70 for the previous shape for 1,500 quid. And I was like, go on mate, let's go out in it. I want to see this thing. And I sat in that car and I could not believe how comfy the seats were. I could not believe how spacious it was and how refined it was for an old car. And immediately I just was like, I would way rather be in this car every day going to London and back than my Civic. And my Civic's worth about 5.5 or something, I can't remember. And this car's worth 1,500 quid. And it reminded me of what I loved about my Volvo C30 when I used to have one of those. It just melted the miles away. It was such a chill place to be. The interior quality was great. The sound system was unrivaled to anything else I'd owned and owned since. And yeah, it just made you feel good. It made boring miles feel like relaxing miles, not just having to get a job done. I just love their ethos, and I love the fact it's not trying to be super duper sporty. It's a car that knows what it's for. And I don't think there's enough sensible cars that truly know what they're for these days. Everything is putting itself on the largest rims possible and slamming itself and giving itself S-Line, R-Line, AMG line, M Sport trim for people who don't make the most of all that stuff. And you just get a compromised ride to look cool. And yes, you can do that with this. You can get the R design. But I specifically wanted one of these, with nice chubby tyres on it and slightly softer springs, So let's really quickly talk about engines. It's quite a bizarre car, really. You can have a 1.6, 115 brake D2 diesel engine in it, and you can go right up to a D5 with a big chunky 2.4 5-cylinder in it. You can go petrol. You can go right up to a T6. That's a 350 brake horsepower 6-cylinder petrol in it. A hybrid 5-cylinder diesel that apparently will return 155 mpg, but in reality I think it's more like 85, which is pretty good. Yeah, the car has just got such a random breadth, and I can't really cover them all off. The thing I will really quickly say though is it gets really confusing really quickly. You have, in 2014, there was a big update when they went from, when Geely developed some brand new engines, and they went from 5 cylinders to 4 cylinders as a whole. That D4 is basically the pick of the bunch. You've got nearly all the power and speed, 7.5 seconds to 60 of, say, the big chunky D5, but you've got all the fuel economy of a D2. You've got zero road tax if you have the manual, for example. So very, very popular. They were the one that I was going to go for, but this D3, the older 5-cylinder, which used to be 163 brake, then they detuned it to 136. This is 136. I thought it was going to be a bit underpowered, but I thought I'd go drive it anyway, and I'm so surprised. It's got 260 pound-feet of torque, which is loads, and that's plenty more than a Golf GTI from 2010. So it's got plenty of pull, and it just feels effortless nearly all the time. And even when you're hardly touching the accelerator, down low, it's just pulling and pulling, and it gives you this message, and it conveys the fact, oh, I've got plenty more power to go, and you're hardly touching the accelerator. So, really nice car. I don't really ever yearn for more, even when I've got 4 people in the car. The reality is, if you do give it 100% and really put your foot all the way down, you discover there actually wasn't that much more power to give, but it's fine for overtakes, and it's plenty enough for the motorway, so I'm happy. As for nearly all of them, you can get an official Volvo Polestar remap, more aggressive, much more responsive car with about 20% power increase for most cars. So worth noting, by the way. Economy, really happy with it. In 5,000 miles on the trip here, is saying that I've done 48.6 as an average. In reality, that's more like 45, 46 if you do pump to pump calculation. And for those long motorway trips when I'm, not going much above 75, 80, it's actually been just effortless and easy to keep that at 55, 56. And I have actually managed to sustain 63 mpg for a couple of hundred miles before by taking it really easy. So yeah, capable of quite a lot. Gearboxes, manual or auto. Something to note, the manual doesn't have a footrest and anywhere to put your foot, which I think is a really bad design flaw and not good for long distance ergonomics, which is what this car excels at otherwise. So it's an easy answer for me, despite the higher tax and the slightly lower MPG, the auto all day. Be aware, Volvo say they're sealed for life, and basically gearbox experts and specialists will tell you it should be serviced. They should have their oil and their fluids changed, and the same gearbox used in Toyotas and other products and other manufacturers, they all say to service it every 50,000 miles. So I think you get the idea. So despite the fact this one has no evidence of it being done at all, yes, I do have it booked in. 150,000 miles, it's still doing great, it hasn't had any issues, but in the real cold, the gear changes are a little bit slow, so I think it's time to look after it, to be honest, and get that done. So let's talk about the chassis, because this is actually where the Volvo really shines, and I think they smashed out the park. They've really understood. This car knows what it's for, which is really refreshing, particularly in the non-R design guys, which does make it a bit firmer than it should be, to be honest. This is my pick of the bunch. The regular non-R design, or any luxury spec that isn't, that's what I would go for. It's a Ford Mondeo platform underneath, which is actually class leading, so it actually feels sure-footed, it responds really well, it's just actually a really good chassis. But it's so comfy. It's really good. It's not going to be S-Class and 7 Series comfort, but it's not far off. And it deals with the bumps in the road really well. It absolutely belongs on a motorway. And given that they could have kept it close, at that kind of sharper end of the scale on the Mondeo platform, I think the Volvo engineers made the right choice in dialing it back and tuning this thing for comfort more than anything else. It's just not the kind of car that you lob about, so I think they did make the right call. This car has done 150,000 miles. You would never know it. It doesn't rattle, it doesn't squeak, there's not a single bit of interior worn from it, there's no scratches around buttons, there's no creaks. My 80,000 mile Civic made more noise, and that had rattly windows, and that felt, despite everything being reliable, that felt more like a car that had done high miles. Got to commend Volvo for their construction and their quality. To be in every day, this is a delightful place to be. And this is about as loud as it gets, by the way. Nice. What do you have to look out for reliability-wise and for these Volvos? Well, Volvo have a reputation for going on forever and ever, and there are plenty of examples of people with cars with 300,000 miles, 400,000 miles, which is mad, and loads around 200,000 as well. And they do just seem to keep going, but they really have to be looked after properly, probably serviced more regularly than the minimum, and they say every 18,000 miles, but I think these things should be getting serviced every 10. And again, I think that number was used to appease company fleet buyers and stuff like that, and them alleging that the gearbox never needs doing. So you can buy a car with full history and discover it's just not been serviced that often and the gearbox hasn't been touched. Just be aware. Where do Volvo sit reliability-wise though, as I was just saying? In actual fact, they sit kind of bang on average. So they're not, like this car to me has been super reliable. I've had a pipe split, which is really common, and it got a bit of boost leak and the engine light came on, but it was a 40 quid part and a 2-hour job, and then reset the code and you're back in business. And it's been absolutely flawless otherwise. It is statistically these cars are more reliable than all of the German makes. But as I said, they don't touch the Japanese manufacturers. So if you're buying this on a shoestring budget and you can't afford the surprisingly expensive Volvo upkeep and the maintenance of these things, they are as expensive and if not slightly more than most of the German ones if you were to go to main dealer. But it should be pretty solid, but just don't expect it to be perfect. And I've known that going in, and if anything goes wrong, I'm not going to hold it against it, and it shouldn't hopefully spoil my ownership experience. You do hear about the odd lemon, which is the worrying thing, and you know, some poor people have had their car for under a year and they've spent thousands fixing them and you know, putting things right. So just be aware and really shop carefully. When it comes to common problems though, the bizarre thing is there's quite a long list of things, but they're not universal. It'll be this year, this engine. Was it made between this date and this date? Has it been recalled for this, this, and this? So it's hard to give you a blanket statement here, but just do your research carefully. And overall, as someone who has reliability PTSD, it's obviously good enough that I decided to go for it. But you know, one of the things to note, I would personally avoid a car with a sunroof. Because you can get water ingress and leaks that go down and they run all the way into the back of the electrics, and they can kill the entire center console and all of the instruments and things and just completely wreck your car. So that is something to note, and why I definitely didn't want one of those. And even the non ones like this, you have to check around the windscreen as well for seals that eventually go. They're not expensive to deal with, but just check for damp and check for damp around the carpets and things in case. We're just so conditioned these days with what sells, and that's sporty this, fast driving, blah, blah, blah. You know, everything has to be rewarding to drive. And obviously I do feel that way. If you've got good roads around you, I'm a petrol head that has loved tossing good cars around into a good, you know, throwing it into a bend and stuff. But I feel like it has just made people forget how good a car can make you feel for going completely the opposite way. And it's so easy to automatically assume that if a car isn't sporting, it has to be boring. I really underestimated how much this car was just going to put me in a good mood for otherwise really dull driving. And when I've had a long day at work, I've had a long shoot, I've got up really early, I've been crawling in traffic for a couple of hours, and I'm just plodding away on my way home or whatever, it just puts you in a good mood. The sound system is absolutely incredible. The seats are so comfy. You're just in your own little happy bubble. The chassis is not so unbelievably dull that you just feel like you're driving a ship with dead steering, you know, or steering a ship, shall I say. I feel like it just does so many things really, really well. And I just think it's worth you considering and giving it a go before you go and buy a more obvious alternative, and just see what you think. So what do I think of the car now that I've had it for a year? And actually, 16,000 miles of driving, I still love it. It's superb, it's brilliant. I've just enjoyed pretty much every drive in it. I always get out of the car feeling more relaxed, recharged. That boot has been a slight problem at times. You know, my gear has now grown in a size where most jobs I go on, I've got a couple of things spilling into the rear footwell. You know, I don't like showing people what's in the car if I walk away and go to the toilet somewhere at a service station late at night or something. That kind of thing bothers me, and that is a good point that I have actually looked for other cars. I've been looking at Skoda Superbs, I have looked at Volvo V60s, etc, etc. But you know, I think that's a rare use case that most people don't fill their boot on almost every occasion they use it. And even so, I love this car enough and I've got a good enough bond with it that I'm just going to get on with that and leave it as is. It's been fantastic, and I really can't wait for many, many more hours and miles in this car. But as I said before, if you are thinking of buying one or now going and looking at one, I can't stress this enough. Go and do your homework and learn them properly. There's too many common thises and issues that, and careful for this per specific year and engine and whatever, to just make an easy guide for this. So just go and look at what your budget is and what you're thinking of getting, and just be careful when you're going to buy. Overall, if you've got a bit of spare cash and you're ready for some slightly higher maintenance costs, these are the forgotten gems of Auto Trader. I hope you've enjoyed. I'd love to see you on the new one. Please do like and subscribe, and we'll catch you later.